So now I'm going to talk about emergency procedures. So there's a few things that could go wrong here. You could have one of the two filters cavitating. It's going to sound like a chopping, grinding noise. Sometimes that's because the water level got a little bit low from evaporation and maybe this hasn't topped it off properly or something's wrong and that's not working. You could actually tone these down a little bit if they're just a little noisy by flipping the little intakes to the side. Sometimes I do that at night when I'm trying to sleep and they're a little loud because it does fluctuate even when there's nothing wrong. But if something is drastically wrong, you'll know because it'll be grinding. I have shut-off switches for all of the equipment on the tank. This guy here, like I said, I'm going to try to get this dialed in again. Every time I do a water change or have my hands in the tank, this has a tendency to bubble out of control. Sometimes it comes right back to where it's supposed to. Sometimes it foams out and this will be all cocked and it'll be running down the side and making a mess. I'm going to show you how to turn this off if that ever happens. You can remove this cup and go dump it in the sink. This tube, when you put it back, has to be in here. And this gasket needs to be flat. And then when you turn it back on, you have to have it turned off to remove the cup. When you turn it back on, watch it. As the foam rises up, you'll see, and it'll come all the way up this tube. If you see anything bubbling and spitting at the corners and running down, turn it off and just let it sit overnight before trying to do it again. Watch, too, if you play with this and then you go feed the cats or something, come back and check that it's not completely filled up and just running through the overflow tube, because usually at that point this will start to get crazy and then raise up and everything goes everywhere. Don't want that. Worst case scenario, just shut it off and be done with it for the week. I'm hoping you don't need to do it. This has been running like this, which is what we want to see for a week now since my last water change, so I'm hoping to have that all set again. The light is on a timer. This is all set up with its own schedule. It will always be running, but it's going to go through different modes and everything, as will the light. So depending on what time of day you come, you might see a different color in the tank. Sometimes it'll be more blue, sometimes it'll be more white, and so on. So emergency shut off for these things is down here on this panel here. This switch that says AquaClear 70 actually shuts off both of them. So if I flip this switch, notice how it got a little bit quieter and the return waterfalls are not running anymore. But if I flip it back on, there we go. You shouldn't really have to mess with it. You shouldn't have to turn it off, but if for some reason you did, there it is. And of course now the algae that was stuck to the intake is starting to drift around again. I do need to clean this today. The next one in line is the protein skimmer. If I shut the protein skimmer off, that really quiets things down. And now you could take out the collection cup and go and dump it if you needed to. Shouldn't need to mess with it, but that's more if it's foaming over and getting out of control. So if that's the case, go ahead and shut it off. If you put the cup back on or whatever, go ahead and flick it back on. Sometimes all it has to do is sit off for a day or two. And I don't know what changes, but all of a sudden it starts behaving. The cobalt heater, the heater's not actually plugged into it. The Inkbird controller is. You won't need to worry about the heater unless for some reason the temperature's like 100 degrees. Don't foresee that happening. The Nero pump you can shut off as well. You shouldn't need to. This one is your light. You should not need to touch that either. And then these switches are actually for this tank, and there shouldn't be any reason to shut any of those off unless you're doing maintenance on the tank, which you will not be doing. So that's it for emergency procedures on that. Other than that, there will be 2 towels with which to dry stuff up. You can always run to the bathroom and get more if there's a real problem. There should never be a significant leak to worry about. It's more splashing and spilling. You can always check to see that there's nothing dripping down the bottom here. I did have that happen once, but there was a very stupid reason it was happening that's been alleviated. That should be it. I'm going to do one more video explaining some basic science behind this, just to kind of tie some things together and maybe you'll get a better understanding of some of it.